Hey y'all, Jim Craddock here. I have something important to talk about today, and it may come as a surprise to many of you. Uh, if you are seeing this, then I have either passed away or uh, medicine has finally figured out that something is drastically wrong with me, and I finally feel comfortable releasing this information. It's a difficult story, and I'm not going to go into all of it right here. There will be plenty of more explanations in other places and here. But in short, I have a medical condition that is real, is iatrogenic, which means it's caused by treatment, and it has been redacted or removed from medical literature. And for ethical reasons, most likely. But the problem with doing that is that people like me are left with a workforce of medical professionals that have no knowledge or training in the condition, and therefore they don't they have no idea it exists. They don't know to look for it. They don't know especially how to treat it. And it's a very insidious condition in that it basically hides. So there aren't any real markers that pop up to alert them that, hey, something is really weird here. But for the individual that has it, trust me, many things pop up over many years, and it's a very difficult situation. So my goal would be to communicate the condition and to try to bring light to it, and to bring light to the fact that medicine has decided on some level what we should and should not know about, which I find completely shocking and against the very tenets of science. Uh, and that leaves people like me without any, basically being treated like we're crazy for a very long period of time. So just to get kind of straight to the heart of the matter, it started in 1995, and I had hyponatremia, and I brought that on myself, but it was caused by other medical issues, and in the end, I was forced to try to find a way to resolve my condition. Sorry, my nose is acting up as usual. Uh, Try to find a way to resolve my condition by myself, because nobody where I was at the moment was willing to even medically test me. Uh, so I did so. I found an article. It talked about a treatment for people with a condition almost identical to mine, but was brought on by a slightly different pathology. And it had two ways that this condition can be treated, one of which was not available to me where I was at, because at the time I had put myself into a mental hospital because I hadn't been able to sleep due to the condition. My pupils were 100% dilated, and I hadn't been eating because my stomach hurt so much. And so here I was, had locked myself up, but by some stroke of luck, they allowed me to read their medical text. I find this condition. It says, hey, there's two ways to treat it. One would be this method that you would obviously have to have medical resources for. The other one, you really should have to have medical resources for, but it really was just a matter of acidification of the subject, and then raising blood pressure. And so I decided to try to replicate that. I did so successfully. I'm quite 100% certain about that. I'm 100% certain about this whole condition. Now then, some of the science I don't have right. I'm sure it's been a long time since I've read the article, but I haven't ever been able to find the article, which we'll cover maybe in a bit. But so I treated myself. I instantly resolved the medical issues that I was having, most of them, which were quite significant. And I was able to be released over the course of several days. However, my life was difficult for the immediate future. It left me in a state of kind of mind fog and things, which when you're who I am with, kind of the brains that I was given, is very depressing. But anyway, I found a way out of that by using uh, a antifungal. It turns out that the condition is fungus related. Over the next several years, I tried to convince myself that I didn't have this resulting condition from this article, because the resulting condition from the article, it said it would give you, about 25 years of added life, but you would go through these changes that were caused by kind of the way you resolved things, and it's at each one of these changes, you just go through hell basically for a month or two, and then you'd kind of continue on. Everything would kind of balance out again. And this is the body compensating for the changes that were originally made. And it's very complex. It has to do with electrolyte balance, and I've written it all up, but as you can imagine, having to do with electrolyte balance, there's bodily functions involved in the write-up. So if you do find the write-up, which is where you might expect it to be, knowing who I am, Jim Craddock, then realize that there's a lot of personal information there that you might not be really wanting to read about me, but it's rather important to describing the whole thing. So anyway, so I go through how every, I don't know, every several years I would go through something rather severe. My family would have to deal with it, and then it would resolve, and I would continue on. I'd get in great shape. I'd continue running, etc. And then you go through these kind of decompensating periods where the body stops being able to compensate in one way. Kind of this condition of this fungus comes back, and it kind of knocks out another layer, and you keep going, and it's incredibly complex. I also find it very fascinating. It's to think that there could be this type of complex condition, which I've likened to a Rube Goldberg machine of biology and biochemistry, brought on by a fungus, which is Candidiasis, which is 400 million years old, and man is not nearly that old, obviously. So it's learned a few tricks in its day, but still, to know that it can trigger this, kind of decades-long process that it always leads to the same place, always optimizes its consumption of energy and ATP. It's really quite fascinating, and I find it to be most likely an evolutionary step on our chain, just because at some point, for it to have learned all these different steps that it has to do over all these different years, it had to have basically been programmed that way, which means it learned, oh, if I do this, okay, this happens. And so just trial and error, reproducing, evolution. But for it to have done that, that means our bodies had to have been different. They had to have been like I caused mine to be after my initial treatment. And that has to do with having the pituitary take over electrolyte balance from the hypothalamus, using hormones, and by doing that, it now can change all the hormones from human growth factor, adrenaline, and norepinephrine, and all these things that it can impact. I mean, there's so many of them, and luteinizing hormone, and it can impact your thyroid hormones and everything else, and all the way down to your immune system. Anyway, so the pituitary takes over control of that whole system, but what it can't realize is the volume of your system anymore. So it maintains the electrolytes where they should be. This is why it's insidious, because nothing ever really shows up on tests. Electrolytes all show within normal ranges. Nobody ever tests these kind of really, weird hormones if all these electrolytes are normal. And so over the years, what happens is you basically kind of the layers of your body, starting at your epidermal layer. They apoptify, and which means they shrink. And this is really bizarre science, and they die. But it's really bizarre science that deserves to be researched. I think there's potential here for a lot of different things. The original article that I mentioned, having read, was quite lengthy with pictures and everything, and I go into that more. But it mentioned that two things. One, that the condition itself had been researched as a possibility for a super soldier program. Just kind of off the cuff mentioned near the end of the article as it's summarizing itself. And that's because it does so many different things to the body, allows you to, so dehydration really isn't an issue if you think about it, because so if it's controlling electrolytes in your blood, if you start getting dehydrated, it just pushes the extra electrolytes out of your blood system into your epidermal layer or into wherever it's pushing at that time, and it keeps your electrolytes in balance. And this is a great example. One time I did the Tulsa run, and afterwards I was horribly sick because I had forgotten to drink fluids right after the race was over, due to just logistics of meeting up with my wife and son and everything. And a couple hours later, suddenly I'm vomiting and everything. And so I vomited for hours, and I go to urgent care, and they run blood tests on me. You say, well, your electrolytes are all in line, but you're obviously dehydrated because your lips are really dry. And so they gave me fluids and sent me on my way. And that's a great example of how this condition allows people to do things that they wouldn't normally be able to do. So what that's saying is that my body should have, been revolting in other ways, but the condition in and of itself, allowed you to push past that. And there are other things that it allows the people to do, but obviously with the ultimate outcome being negative, it was canned, I'm sure, as hopefully as some type of super soldier program. And the other thing about it that I wanted to mention was that it was being reclassified. It mentioned that in the article. And so what is that reclassification? What's the purpose of that? And they said it was being reclassified as autoimmune polyendocrine with candidiasis ectodermal dystrophy, which is APEC, however you say that, APECED. But that's obviously not the pathology, but it's the closest thing probably to it. And so maybe they thought just lumping it in as like a type 3 or a type 4 or something, and then they wouldn't have to have this diagnosis and this research out there and this explanation anymore. And that's all I can think of. And I think the author put it in there because they were kind of a little bit, concerned about the hiding of the diagnosis. Anyway, you can't go out there and find this condition called terminal onset diabetes insipidus with candidiasis major anywhere. However, I found it in this book in 1995, and the book was rather recent. It talked about rather recent developments in medicine as potential treatments, but in the end, it said that because circulation changes from day one, and it kind of is key that from day one, like the thing that I had caused happened to myself that could be resolved one of two ways. Was you cause this change in the way your heart beats, which causes suction at the heart. And so when the system changes from the overall driving force being pumping to the overall driving force being pulling with suction, okay, that changes kind of the whole dynamic of how your body works. And because of that initial change, that in the end, you really couldn't do anything to save this person, because their whole system had adjusted to this over the years, and it leads to huge volume loss. And literally at the very end, for these people in the article, the people that had been lasted the longest, they eventually aren't moving anymore because any slight movement can cause damage to their heart, etc., because they have so little flow, their heart is so weak. You've gone through these acid and base cycles. Anyway, the science is really deep. And what I'm trying to say is that it's real. I think those of you that know me or who have followed me, on Facebook over the years, know that I'm a really serious person. I enjoy a laugh, but I'm not someone who's going to like pull your leg. And I've tried to explain this condition to doctors since I first got out. When I first get out, I was like, well, look, my kidneys are working backwards. It's all I could remember how to try to explain. And that's part of the thing is that, so because of this pressure change, your nephrons, the polarity changes there. And so now you're retaining in potassium instead of shedding it, instead of retaining sodium when you're trying to preserve volume. And that causes all these issues, and your body takes the potassium and it puts it into tissues. Uh, and and then, you know, so I was going through that, and you know, I also, you get all these other weird things when you go through these transitions, a lot of skin burning and different things. So I try, and there's polyuria every single time, and it's a dark atypical apolyuria, and so I'm like, you know, trying to figure this out during the course of my life. I do research at different points, and you know, I think, well, maybe I have porphyria, but that, my God, that would be better than what I really think I have. But you know, in the end, around 2012, I'm very sure that I have what I thought I had, and and so I started making life decisions around it, trying to, you know, knowing that my life wasn't going to be the normal period of time, and to try to, you know, enjoy more of my life. And so I made significant decisions knowing that I have this. And man, I went through some more transitions, and some of them are just the most bizarre things. I mean, there was one where and this is when your body changes the way it's compensating. There was one where I was literally just kind of nauseated, and I had been. I was brought on by giving blood a couple weeks earlier, which caused me the next day to start having uh, kind of dizziness and the room spinning type thing. They didn't find anything there. And then a couple weeks later, after I've had a couple weeks of nausea, suddenly I'm flat on the floor. And this is this Addisonian crisis that it described, that literally the patient will be able to push through an Addisonian crisis because their system was so basically, you know, hot wired. And so, man, I was on the floor, couldn't breathe. My hands and feet were tingling. I managed to throw my phone to the sun. By the time the ambulance got there, I was able to sit up, but my blood pressure was like 90 over 50 or something like that. They took me to the hospital, gave me 2 units of fluids, and my pressure was still 90 something over, you know, 60 something, which I have all that documented. And they didn't have an explanation for why it happened or anything. Uh, and you know, my blood pressure has never been that low. So it's always been like 135 over 90, you know, almost a little slightly high. So anyway, you know, I've been through some bizarre stuff in my life, and I've pushed through it all, and I have tried to bring attention to this condition. Where I'm at right now today is I have, you know, various doctors that I've kind of associated with, that I am having, you know, follow up on the things that are going wrong. Uh, and you know, I've had some really, really painful days. I have some really, you know, painful things that can happen right now but uh, it isn't horrible. I'm able to sit here and talk to you, so obviously it's not horrible. It has given me osteopenia, and you know, it's affected my weight, my musculature, but you know, I'm still all here. I'm able to think. I'm able to be with my family, and that's the most important thing. But this is a serious discussion. I am 100% serious about this. I hope that my documentation of this through websites, YouTube videos, medical records, and trying to remember everything I can about the article brings somewhat to light about this. You know, I hope somebody takes it and runs with it and says, you know, I'm going to find that experiment. I've looked for people who were doing experiments at that time. I've had library researchers look, but because I found this in a diagnostic text as a case study, it wasn't diagnostic tests. They don't have the individual diseases in there categorized external to the diagnostic test. So you either have to find that text or the original research. And I haven't been able to find either, which leads me to believe that it's been redacted for a reason. No doctor is aware of this condition, which means it's never taught, which means you know, that it isn't really documented much. Somebody out there somewhere would have read it or something. So, you know, it's just not out there. So, you know, that's my story. There's a lot more about it. I just want people to be aware and know that no, I'm not crazy. And yes, this thing was real. And, you know, obviously I'm just taking it as it comes. And I don't expect to have much longer from where I am today. And that's why I'm creating this message. And you know, I don't know if anybody will see this. I don't know exactly how I'm going to try to get this message out. I've got a lot of other messages that I've been recording. My intention is to have this be the first one that's available. What I would ask of you is please forward this to every single person you know. And I know that sounds crazy, but this is lost science, and you know, it's impacted my life. And I think that, you know, it should be brought to the attention that, hey, there is this governing body of medicine. I don't know if it's the WHO with them making ICD codes or whatever, that has chosen to make this medical knowledge hidden, but it impacts people. And, you know, I am not a conspiracy theorist person. All I know is that the life I live has been very colored by this whole condition that no doctor has been able to find anything about substantially until now, that it's affecting my muscles. And we'll see if they can manage to find something before it finally basically just is going to shut my heart down. Uh, and uh, and that all sounds crazy. Like, are you going to have a heart attack? No, literally, that's not what's going to happen. It's just going to, the valve on it, it's just going to basically kind of give out because of all the changes my body has to go back and forth through the course of this condition and everything. So anyway, please forward this. I want this to go viral, and maybe somebody can make a short version of it. I encourage somebody to duplicate all my videos because I expect them to be taken down by somebody at some point. Thank you.